6:15.
Did you hit start? Now we'll be late.
There's no start button.
I did share that with Eric Johnson. But Eric Johnson, fun facts. He just put a laugh emoji. He didn't say anything. He's been trying to do more educational type things lately instead of he went on a streak there where he was doing some pretty questionable stuff.
All right. I don't know what's going on.
Can't be early and you can't be late. Yeah, you had to hit...
Now it's saying we're live.
Yes, that's live.
Yeah, but there's no...
Yeah, it's right there. Look. Look at the... Maybe.
All right. Well, here we go. Good evening, Open Arms.
You needed that.
Had to let out a little bit of frustration here as we're trying to get this whole thing started here, and Facebook is and YouTube.
Computers are our friends.
And Subsplash and OBS and whatever. Who knows what's the real problem here. But, hey, y'all, we're here finally. Pastor Emil here, Scott here, live from the Open Arms Podcast Studio for another episode of Sweet Jesus. Taste and see the Lord is good. Ice cream is sweet, but Jesus is sweeter. I finished my ice cream. We had to wait so long for this. Actually, I finished it before you even got here, but brought some ice cream over to the kiddos. Had a nice Kit Kat drumstick.
Nice.
Vanilla ice cream, fudge center, and then in the bottom of the cone, solid fudge.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty good. The chocolate ones are also good, but I actually like those better than the regular drumsticks, the Kit Kat ones.
You know, you hooked us on those chocolate chip ice cream sandwiches there for a while.
Oh, the Fat Boy ones?
Well, they weren't. I think they were like an off-brand or something. Because Janet said, I don't think they're the brand name or something. So we bought this off-brand, the store brand. And, we wound up going, over a period of time through 2 or 3 boxes before we kind of like, okay, we're good with that for now.
Well, the Fat Boy cookie sandwiches, 1,000% better than the off-brand.
Yeah, but did they have the chocolate chips in them? In the Fat Boy ones?
Well, in the cookies, yeah.
Oh, and no, but this had also additional chips in the ice cream.
I think it may have actually had like cookie dough in the
ice cream.
In the ice cream, possibly, or something. Maybe it was just like caramel or something in there. I don't know, but the Fat Boy ones were really good. Anyway, y'all pull up a chair and grab yourself something sweet to eat because we're going to talk about Jesus somehow with this whole thing, it comes out, I think, for sure. As we look at Rule 8 from Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. Great book. This chapter, holy cow. I mean, I underlined and highlighted some pages, was like the whole page. There were just so many things that I wanted to, oh man, this is so important. Oh man, this is so important. Oh man, this is so important. But obviously, we're not going to be able to do all of that. We'll have to try and hit the highlights. I think he does sort of, I don't know if it's redundant. It is repetitive in some ways, but I think it drives home similar themes throughout the chapter. And here we are talking about Rule 8, tell the truth or at least don't lie. So telling the truth, a rule for life. And for sure, I think we can get Jesus in there, right? I am the way, the truth, and the life. He brings Jesus out at some point, actually very explicitly, the Word of God and all this kind of stuff. And he's kind of dances around a subject that I think we brought up before. You know, that's the whole John 3, lifting up the serpent in the wilderness. Anyone who, just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him will have eternal life. That's John 3:15 before the more popular John 3:16. And that's really what's going on here after we, underneath the whole idea of truth. So we got to wrestle with the idea of truth and lying, recognizing that we are lying to ourselves far more than we think we are. And then the reason why we don't tell the truth or tell ourselves the truth or live the truth is because it's scary, it's painful, it involves suffering, but that's the way forward. If you don't tell the truth, far worse suffering lies ahead. That's kind of what I think he gets at. Is that a fair encapsulation of
Yes.
the whole chapter there?
Yeah, I had, he says, pick up the stone that you are tied to and heave it forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Articulate your experience to yourself and do not lie to yourself.
Yeah.
Those two ideas out of that I caught.
Yeah, there's more to that quote though, and it's not good. I think it goes somewhere. I remember that part particularly.
I think that's toward the front because I wrote like I told you earlier, I wrote my notes kind of backwards.
I actually felt like it's profoundly political in a big sense, that he makes the explicit connection that to the state, right? That if we are lying, eventually that leads to the state being corrupt and being evil. And, he goes on to talk about how, Stalin in Russia and Hitler in Germany and Mao in China and Pol Pot in Cambodia. He talks about these in a fair amount of detail and says that behind all of it are lies. That in order for a state to get to that point requires its citizens to accept a lie, believe the lie, and then reinforce the lie or enforce the lie themselves. He tells this joke about somebody getting a tour of hell, and all the, the devil takes him to all these different burning hot cauldrons, and, it gets to one, and there's Americans in there, and they're trying to get out, and they have devils there to push them back in, and then gets to another one, and this is where we put the French, and
kind of a similar thing.
Double the size and more demons and hotter and whatever, and they have demons around it to when they're trying to climb out, they push them back in, And then like they get to this one pot, it's like enormous, like triple, quadruple, whatever the size, and so much hotter you can't even get close to it. But there are no demons. This is why are there no demons? He said, oh well, these are the Russians. That if anyone tries to get out, one of their own pulls them back in. Soviet, I think, is really the Soviets. This is a Cold War era kind of story. But he's getting at that idea, the lie behind totalitarian regimes, that the only way they can exist is when people believe and perpetuate the lie.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's what that story was trying to.
The state tells you what to say and think, and if you do not say and think it, or if you do not say it, then you will be punished.
Yeah.
So therefore, to not be punished, you say it, and then eventually, if you say it enough,
You're punished anyway.
you think it, and then you just become part of the
Machine, yeah.
the lie, the whole lie. Your whole life is, that.
And how is it that this sort of came up in the last one too? I mentioned the Hannah Arendt, the banality of evil, the Nuremberg trials, just kind of how is it that these seemingly normal people could be part of such evil? And that's how you believe the lie. And I do actually think that the freedom of speech may be one of the most important parts of what makes America America. Not just what makes America America, but what keeps us at least somewhat free,
Mm-hmm.
and keeps us from becoming completely totalitarian. And I do think that we are in a really bizarre time where I think a lot of people on all sides really at some point believe a variety of lies. Although there seem to be a lot more, I think just saying that, I think half of the people would say, oh yeah, Trump, he's the one telling all the lies. Or the other half of the people would say, oh yeah, Kamala Harris, right? She's telling all the lies. And that's, I think, what that's our issue, is that nobody's really telling the truth. They've got their spin on the truth. And so I think that just means we have to always be vigilant, because no matter, you may get the official that you want, but ultimately they will trend towards totalitarianism. And so we all have to be ready to undo what we may have done, and I don't actually see that happening a whole lot. I see a lot of people doubling down. Hey, I chose this side. That's how I voted. And then when it starts to look bad, I just make excuses. I think everybody does that. It's actually a human sociological, psychological thing that we do. We try to justify our past decisions. There's a lot of research out there on it. I would have been more prepared to share that if I thought I was going to be talking about it, but it just sort of happened.
We have that movement, or I don't know if you'd call it a movement yet, but the concept of misinformation now, and they want to police the different, social media platforms to say, that's misinformation. Then the other side will say, no, this post is misinformation. And the problem is, who's the judge?
Yeah.
And then as soon as you say, well, the government's the judge, then you've stepped one step closer to all those.
Oh, you're firmly in it.
Yeah, that's when you're in it.
You're screwed.
I mean, that's where
it's over.
So, I mean, and we're like seem to be like dancing with that at the moment.
Yeah.
Or at least they're suggesting, hey, let's do the waltz. And we're all going, Well,
and they've just been so colossally wrong every time, I feel, and it's not to say, see, this is the part that I feel, makes it most difficult to deal with, is that there is a sense in which both sides are right, and both sides are wrong. Sometimes about the exact same thing, seemingly mutually exclusive things at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's why the name of the chapter is what it is, because you tell the truth, or at least don't lie.
Yeah.
So if one of his examples about telling the truth is like, we're basically all idiots and we don't really know what the truth is. But at least when you're trying to tell the truth, try to tell the truth as best as you know it,
Mm-hmm.
and don't intentionally spin things to make it work in your favor. And I think that's what they do. They spin things to work in their favor.
It's all spun to work in their favor, and that is why it is so evil. Just the whole system itself can just become so evil. And one of the things he does, I think it's helpful that he goes into this, is that is hard, right? Discerning what is actually true is so hard and so complicated, but that is why it's imperative to be able to receive correction, essentially. Repentance or admitting you're wrong. There was one section, confession, sort of that idea in Christianity, that we have a time where we confess where we have been wrong, and how integral that is to being a Christian, the Christian faith, receiving God's gifts of forgiveness and eternal life, is all predicated upon our ability to confess, I don't know all the truth. I'm not living in line with the truth. So if you can't do that, that goes back to the whole, John 3:15, as Moses lifted up the bronze serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him will have eternal life. So,
you must look. Yeah, you must look
upon. Yeah.
What you've caused, or
But so many of us would rather just say, I'm fine. Oh, that wasn't such a big deal. Oh, I didn't get anything wrong. You did. And that just really ends poorly. He's got this story or illustration he tells about like forest fires. You collect the dead wood, collects at the bottom of the forest floor, and every once in a while it's supposed to have a fire. And it takes that wood, burns it up, and releases much needed nutrients into the soil. But if you artificially prevent the fire from happening, that dead wood builds up. And then all of a sudden you have a fire that you can't put out. And it just burns up everything. And it's not good for the soil. It burns up the soil. It's just terrible. So that's why it's important to be vigilant now, not later. Because then the catastrophe is just too much to overcome. Revolution, he talks about, and revolution is messy. Sometimes you need one. But if you can avoid it by not letting it get to that point, well, we'd all be much better off.
Yeah, after, going through this chapter, I really kind of felt like this should have been the first chapter in the book.
Yeah.
Right, because this is like the basis of maybe most of everything, or I haven't gotten through the rest of the book yet, but to me, this is like it's the First Amendment in the Constitution. This is like the most important thing.
Yeah.
To at least to try to wrestle with, not that you can just, read it and say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to start doing that now, because it's not that easy.
Yeah.
But.
So how does this actually play out? I think we're kind of talking theoretical, maybe a little bit, maybe not. We're thinking about the reality in politics, I guess, and government, totalitarianism. But what about the day-to-day stuff? He starts out with a few stories. He's in what did he call it? Montreal's Douglas Hospital. in-house patients, a psychiatric facility before antipsychotic drugs and large-scale deinstitutionalization movements of the late 60s. And there's some patient that comes up to him in this group of students that are there to learn and said, "Why are you all standing here? What are you doing? Can I come along with you?" And his classmate, so this patient asks a classmate, and he the classmate looks at him and like, "What do I say?" And of course, what do you say, right? You don't want to make some kind of problem where there isn't one if you can avoid it. You don't want to antagonize somebody or intentionally hurt somebody's feelings that may be in a bit of a fragile state. And he said, "I told the patient as simply and directly as I could that we were new students training to be psychologists and that she couldn't join us for that reason. The answer highlighted the distinction between her situation and ours, making the gap between us greater and more evident. The answer was harsher than a well-crafted white lie. But I already had an inkling that untruth, however well meant, can produce unintended consequences." She looked crestfallen and hurt, but only for a moment. Then she understood, and it was all right. That was just how it was. So, don't we lie all the time then? I mean, that was the thing. That story and some of the others, it's like we're lying always. He talks about, when you write a paper for college, for a professor, right? Are you writing something that they will like? Or are you writing something because you believe it to be true? And sort of crafting your own vision for the world, your own understanding of the world. And, I mean, I probably did a lot of the whole, writing to get the grade. I mean, maybe not always, but certainly there were times where it was like, well, I know they'll just love this. Like, let's butter them up a little bit.
I guess I didn't give that much thought to it. I was just trying to write something. I guess the one paper comes to mind that I wrote, though, that I thought that I guess when I did finally put in, thoughts that I actually had that I learned or thought I had seen when I read, I did get the best grade or that I had that semester. So
yeah,
I guess from that perspective, but I can't say I was really writing any. Well, other than the fact that I was trying to do all the punctuation correctly and all the
obviously,
the grammar stuff, but
that's not so much for the professor as it is to be accurate and helpful in how you're communicating.
I think most of the time I was like, these books are weird.
Oh, they are.
Yeah, so it's like, what am I getting out of this?
Yeah.
But anyway.
Did you see the video?
Yes.
Yeah, so he actually talks about this writing papers thing, and he says, that maybe there's somebody out there that will give you a B+ instead of an A if you don't take the side that they want or they like or they believe in. But you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody that would really, if you went against their guiding philosophy, if you did a decent job, you'd probably still be okay. You'd be hard-pressed to find somebody that would really ruin your academic career just because you don't agree with them. So you don't have to kiss so much rear end.
Yeah, I don't know. Depends on the class. I think nowadays it's probably more prevalent than not, I would say, but I think it depends on the class and then I say with the subject, and definitely, of course, who the teacher is. But
well, that's why I think he's probably got this Peterson Academy. Have you seen that? Yeah. Well, yeah, because they introduced it when we were in New Orleans back in April, I guess it was. Right? Yeah. Yeah, it's like $500 and you get a university degree, essentially. University education.
From some of the top
smart people in the world. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, it's but I think that's because it really is in some case like, oh yeah, if you don't agree with this view of America or of American history or of dealing with Native Americans or dealing with, racism and African Americans. If you don't have this understanding of it, then you're evil. In this movement of anti-racism, where like you actually have to not just be unracist, but you have to actually push back against people and force the kinds of conflict that
Most of those things you said are, quote, government sanctioned now.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So
And
climate change or any of that stuff,
well, the good thing about America is that there is still that spirit of rebellion.
yeah. Well,
And human beings are not, if we get theological, I mean, human beings tend toward rebellion. I mean,
right.
that's what sin is. It's rebellion. God says do this and we say hell no. Right? We do the opposite. You put your card in those card readers, it says do not remove, and you immediately want to grab the card. I think that's more just messaging, that they could probably improve the messaging there, but it's that same concept. Like, you're not supposed to, and your impulse is to do it. Toddlers, don't take that cookie. Don't take, you can't see me. Maybe if I close my eyes, you can't see me, right?
I saw a video earlier where the toddler, or maybe a little older than a toddler, insisted that an onion was an apple. And the parent kept telling him, no, it is not. It's an onion. It's not an apple. And they said, no, it's an apple. I want to eat the apple.
Okay.
So they did. Yeah. That child was taking bites out of that thing, and tears was running down his eyes.
What a good apple.
Good.
Not wanting to. That's exactly this, isn't it? Like, in order to save face, believe and perpetuate the lie. Right? Mm-hmm. Isn't that what we do? Well, I'm fine. Fine. Nothing to see here. Everything's okay.
I'll send you that video later. It's kind of warpedly funny, because you think the poor kid didn't die, but it's still, anyway.
Well,
you get it. It's obvious, but
sometimes that's what we have to do. That's how we have to learn. We have to learn doing it ourselves, right?
Yeah. So one of the concepts that I got out of this was, speaking of the Bible, and it was the Logos concept, and Jesus was, or God is Logos, which Jesus is Logos in the New Testament, right? And he says that God, Logos, I don't know if I'm jumping too far ahead. There might have been more stuff you wanted to get to.
I think we're already kind of bouncing around, but
yeah, so
it's fine.
Said the Logos, which is the truth, transformed chaos into order at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. The word that produces order from chaos sacrifices everything, even itself, to God. That single sentence, wise beyond comprehension, sums up Christianity.
He also said dies and is reborn.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Every bit of learning is a little death.
Yeah.
Every bit of new information challenges a previous conception, forcing it to dissolve into chaos before it can be reborn as something better. Sometimes such deaths virtually destroy us. In such cases, we might never recover, or if we do, we change a lot. And he tells a story here of a good friend who discovered that his wife of decades was having an affair. He didn't see it coming, plunged him into a deep depression. He descended into the underworld. That's a concept that he brings up, hell, actually, that hell has always existed, because hell is the place where you live the lie. And living the lie, believing the lie, turns you into a person that's always out there blaming. Right? It's the world, and ultimately that can lead you to some pretty terrible things. That you might say, well, since everybody's at fault, then I should get my vengeance upon them. Interestingly, also, he says later that even if you are the one who knows, if you're the one who came up with the lie, to make the world bend to your will, eventually, even if you convince the whole world to believe the lie and you get everything you could ever want and everything you've ever asked for, it will actually, this idea of being that he keeps bringing up, like just existence in and of itself, you'll develop this contempt for it because, well, then it must not be all that great if I can get everybody to believe this stupid lie, you know. And that also perpetuates bad stuff. So, he talks about this friend who goes into this depression. I always thought that people who were depressed should just shake it off. I didn't have any idea what I was talking about. Eventually, he returned from the depths. In many ways, he's a new man and perhaps a wiser and better man. He lost 40 pounds. He ran a marathon. He traveled to Africa and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. He chose rebirth over descent into hell. So, believing the truth, right, is a hard thing to do. And people that, like, there are particular truths that people, he talks a little bit about this. I don't know if this is exactly what I was going to get at, but he talks about this idea of the life lie, that sometimes people run into these, they develop these things that the core of their being that have to be true, even if they're not. And then if it's core enough to who you are, everything you see and hear and learn has to be manipulated into something that protects that life lie from being proven false. And you'd be surprised how many people in the church you bump into as a pastor that very quickly, like, my radar kind of goes off now.
Just spidey sense.
Because my spidey sense, like, oh, and that's not always good either, because here I've navigated dozens of those kinds of situations and those kinds of people, dozens of those kinds of people. So why do I get so, like, when I encounter, partly because they can really screw things up and make life difficult depending on how hard their mind is working to warp everything. But, like I've had people, like, I'll say one thing and then they immediately take it to mean something else. And if you're not paying attention, you might not notice it. But once you start paying attention, you start to see how every time, this goes back to politics, right? Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of an example that wouldn't be very partisan, but
the politics is just so apparent these days. Is all I think.
Yeah. Well, so like the inflation stuff. I mean, Joe Biden for the longest time, because he's out of the race now, so maybe I can talk about him. He was touting his inflation numbers. Oh, we brought inflation down from whatever percent to whatever percent. Like, it never reached this level. And I mean, I actually saw this interview with not Biden, but one of his people on some show somewhere. And this person was just so adamant they were going to insist on, but that wasn't you. Like, that was somebody else. Like, you didn't do that, Well,
it was true, but it was only in the last year or 6 months or something when those numbers actually slowed down from rising. But if you looked at them, and amazingly, I don't think they do it just because he's in office. I think in general, the way they calculate inflation, there's some essential things that they leave out.
Yeah. Well, there you go. There you go. That's a nonpartisan one. Okay. So yeah, they don't count food and energy.
Inflation.
What the hell is that? What is that? How does that even help? It doesn't tell you what inflation is actually doing. And that's why we really do have this, like, dichotomy, this bifurcation, this, like, just, we are having two realities playing out at the same time. There was a jobs report released last week, and it was like, man, booming. Unemployment actually went down. like 250,000 jobs instead of just 100 and something that was predicted, almost double. And then they revised old numbers up, and yet everybody is like, I can't do anything.
They came back recently and had to revise those numbers back down because they weren't.
Did they?
Yeah, they did.
Okay.
A few months ago.
Well, they were doing that for a while. Yeah, there was
Yeah.
a long stretch where they kept revising them down. But that's why it was surprising when it was high and they revised up the previous number, I think.
Yeah.
But yet everybody's like, it was like $45. We get these boxes of eggs at Sam's because we have 6 people that eat unbelievable quantities of food.
Need to get some chickens. I don't know if
they allow that in the city of Slidell or not in the HOA, I don't know. But yeah, we've thought about that quite a bit.
Maybe we can get an inflation exemption to grow chickens.
Yeah. But those boxes, when we first got here, they were $19.99 for 15 dozen eggs. $19.99. At one point, it was like $45.
Wow.
And it went down, and then it went back up recently because there was like a bird flu thing that happened. And just this last time we went to Sam's, it was down to like 32 something for the box. I was like, all right, relief. I guess the flu kind of went through and they got a new crop of birds or whatever. So, but yeah, there's these two movies, these two realities sometimes. And what is the truth? You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yeah, it's you kind of lie when you take that. You say you will, right? Because you can't really do it.
Did he say that?
I don't know.
I think he said something about that in there. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I heard him say one time, I think it was him and Jonathan Pageau talking, or it might have been somebody else, but they said people have these beliefs, what you're telling me, these axioms, and people are fine until you kick them in the axiom. And that's when you have a problem, because they that's their foundation almost. Yeah. Their belief foundation. So, yeah.
And then they gotta, if that collapses, suffering.
Suffering, right.
There is suffering because you have to now reinterpret your entire life up to that point. And it's kind of a big deal.
So be careful when you go around kicking people in the axiom. It's painful in more ways than one.
Well, and I mean, is there a way to do politics better? I mean, you spin it, or is it, because part of me wanted to say that maybe this is a reason for Christians not to be completely detached or apolitical, but to be political in a way that is outside that process, because it is so corrupted. Every little bit of it is corrupted.
Yeah, I love it when they do the fact checking.
Well, the
fact checking is so wrong.
The fact checking is wrong. Yeah. It's just, I mean, did we really think that Donald Trump had 33 lies and Kamala Harris had 1 at the end of the debate?
Was that what it was?
That's what it was. Yeah, 33-1.
I didn't. Yeah.
They're all lying through their teeth, and here's the problem. And I think this ties in with what he's talking about, is that they don't even know. Well, actually, he says they know. He would make that case that they know, but it's in us. I would say they're so immersed in the narratives and the reasons why they started telling the lies that they can't even, there's really no way to get out of it at this point. But the danger is that the other side doesn't tell the truth, right? I mean, if what he's saying,
spin it the other way.
Yeah, if what he's saying is accurate, if the truth is really foundational to everything, then again, how can we even participate in this? What is it? I started trying to figure out, well, how do we as Christians help? And I would say that one way is to try to be nonpartisan and to be completely obsessed with the truth and rip everybody apart. So you find somebody on the left that's not telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, put it out there. You find somebody on the right doing it, put it out there. You voted for someone and now you find reasons why you're concerned, put it out there. I mean, that's the problem. The problem is once you pick a team, once you pick a person, you tend to, because now you take it personally. Now it's how our reluctance to admit these wrong things. That's now we are so connected intimately to this person and these ideas and the platform and whatever, that we begin to do things like them. And I think it's really the politicization of everything that's the problem.
Yes.
The 24-hour Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, all these different options, and they just keep, and it just makes it like this is everything. And if we're going to do this, if we want to achieve something good for society, then we have to tell this lie. It's just a white lie. Like, oh, well, if you knew you could kill Hitler and save 6 million Jews, wouldn't you take part in that assassination? Wouldn't you pull the trigger? Wouldn't you?
He most likely wouldn't have been successful after
probably
reading
not.
Bonhoeffer's book, the book about Bonhoeffer.
Yeah.
They tried a few times and they weren't successful. But, yeah. So you can't just say, I'm going to go back and do that. But, yeah, I get the concept.
It's the justification for the lie.
Yeah.
The justification for taking action contrary to your values. It's
yeah, the problem is, like you said, no matter what side you choose politically, that they don't 100% line up with you, what necessarily, if they what you really believe in, or what you even may think is best. So you're always choosing. I guess maybe you should be choosing not just a team red or team blue or whatever. You should be picking the one that's, and hopefully they're not lying, or that it closely lines up to what you think. I don't know. I mean, you had posed the question, how do you do it? Now,
yeah, no,
the answer. That's the answer. That's the only answer that I have at this point is, I guess you have to pick what's the most important things that you rate
yeah.
what you think is most important, and then see where they stand on that. I don't know. I really don't know.
There just seems to be a tremendous lack of accountability in everything these days. We just, everybody's got a sob story. Oh, well, this is why. Yeah, I murdered those people, but I have this genetic disorder or mental health issue, and so therefore there's a guy in Britain right now, some big star newscaster or something like that, who turned out to be taking advantage of kids.
Oh, really?
For like years, and he's basically making the case that he's got some mental health thing, and you should not lock him up and throw away the key. Of course, Jordan Peterson's answer to that is like, everybody has a hard life, and most people turn out okay. What's your excuse?
Suck it up.
Yeah, get over it.
Yeah, because I think was that in this chapter or the previous one where he said if you 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 or something become repeat offenders of those types of things, and he said if it was 100%, it would have already swept through the whole planet.
Yeah.
And because it hasn't, then it's not that you have
it can stop with you.
Yeah, it can stop. So
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I had this idea as far as trying to deal with accountability. Uh, a lot of people find it seems to be when I bring it up, people really don't like it. It's wildly unpopular. But I had a guy who was a veteran. He was a Christian. He was, pretty good, solid guy. He had his issues, just like all of us. But he said to me one time that he said, I served this country. I spent however many years serving this country in the Army. And I think that has earned me the right to not vote.
Hmm.
And it sounds bizarre. But when you talk to him about it, his reasoning was essentially that, first off, he's a Christian. And second off, he's understanding what we're talking about, that everybody's wrong and everybody needs to be held to account and criticized. And he said, I want to not vote so that I can honestly speak prophetically. So he was, if you think about the fivefold aspects of, Christian ministry, there's the pastor. Apest is apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher, I think is the fivefold parts of ministry. He was prophetic, and he felt like he had this role to speak prophetically against whatever. And he wanted to not vote because he understood that if he voted, it made him, it gave him a bias that he wouldn't have had otherwise. Mm-hmm. So, but what would happen if, there's already like 42 million people that don't vote every time. And is that right? And then whose hands are you leaving it in? I think we got to vote, probably, right? We should vote. And then we should be the first to criticize whoever we voted for. Like, if we can find that, if we can get at what he's talking about here, this openness to being wrong and to go through the suffering, go through the pain, that I think would be ideal. But most people are pretty weak.
Yeah, it's not easy, yeah. Then you see, the whole cancel culture recently, it, I guess, got really strong during COVID because there was a government-sanctioned view on this.
Yep.
And that, you needed to follow it, even though it didn't always make logical sense, what they were saying.
And they ended up being wrong, actually.
Yeah, and they ended up being wrong. And yet there were people where their lives ruined. They were certainly affected because there were some, the ones I'm thinking about were like college professors that had knowledge of this subject, medical or just biological type people. And they started questioning some of it. And next thing you know, they were out of a job.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I've heard people say, give me one example of that, and it's like, and I was listening to Dr. Phil, a little short on Dr. Phil, and he was being interviewed by this particular guy. And he said, well, you say that, but give me an example. He said, well, he says, when this is over with and I go back, I'll send you a list in an email. Because the guy was immediately going to refute,
one.
Yeah, one.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, he said, I'll give you a list of them and you can go research them. And he's like, we're not going to quibble over this one or that one, because, that kind of thing. So he's like, yeah, no, I'm not taking that bait.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which was smart. At first I thought, well, yeah, just give him some, you're going to be right. But it's like, no, this particular guy would have, oh, well, that guy's a moron, or that guy, did you know that guy believed in, he has aluminum foil under his hat all the time, or whatever, You know what I'm saying? He's
yeah.
Whatever.
Well, and the truth is that sometimes those things are they are crazy people.
Yeah.
I mean, there are crazy people, and there are crazy conspiracy theories that are way off the wall.
Right.
But the problem is that there are so many that ended up being true that now you have people that just will believe everything in that realm, right? So like anything that says, well, the government is out to get you, they'll just believe it just because you say it that way. And that doesn't, I don't know that that's always true.
A prevailing thought too these days is that never admit to your mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do, then, then they got you. The other side has got you then. And
Yeah, but
I don't agree with that.
I feel like in real life, that's not true though. If you don't admit your mistakes, people want nothing to do with you eventually.
Because you're eventually going to make a mistake.
Yeah.
Or 100.
Lots of them. And if you can't, and how will they know when you are insisting that you're not wrong? How will they know, oh, you know what, this guy, he usually admits when he's wrong. So right now, the fact that he is double and triple down on this, maybe I should. I mean, that's how you get people to that place. Is you gotta be generally like, oh, you know what, that wasn't good.
Well, definitely in the world of politics, you can't do that, or at least that's, like I said, the prevailing wisdom. If you do that, then it becomes campaign slogans to get you out. Which, you know what, the whole idea of our system of government is not to be in there for a lifetime anyway. If you speak the truth and get kicked out, well, at least you spoke the truth, I guess, right?
Well, they should all get kicked out at some point.
Right.
But I mean, there should be, for sure, term limits in every elected office. There should be a lot of other forms of accountability for elected officials. It should be a sacrifice, not a way to enrich yourself. I mean, those are things that I think we could all agree on.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there is never any movement on it. And why is that? Because we're so busy defending whatever team we're playing for at the moment. And I don't know that he really went into like helping you figure out that way to detach yourself from, being so caught up in that kind of stuff, other than just start telling the truth all the time. Think about it, focus on it, and observe sort of yourself and how you feel. He actually said like he could feel when he was lying. Once he started doing this, he would feel it first. And then he would know he was lying, and he'd have to take some time actually to think, well, what is it that's not right about what I'm saying? What is it that is causing this inner turmoil, this inner conflict? Mm-hmm. And God help us all get there.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. You have to speak truth to yourself. And then don't be afraid. And I don't know if it was in this chapter, but he said, it may have been, but you talk to people, and when you say something that is ludicrous, it dies because they jump on it and they stomp it and they kill it, and you go, oh yeah, that probably wasn't the best thing, But so there's a process there that you have to use, which but yeah, don't lie to yourself.
Yeah. Dialogue and writing in particular, he mentions maybe in the video where he talks about writing. Like, definitely don't write something down that is not true, because that really will mess with you. Like, he's talking about how this really damages you when you live like this, when you lack integrity. Your speech and your life, your values are not lined up. So actually, maybe the First Amendment really And I think this should be something that we obsess about regardless of who were to win any upcoming elections. So like just because one person or the other were to win or lose doesn't mean that the fight for free speech is either won or lost. It's an ongoing thing. But to your point, that whole process is what helps us find the truth. Right? So maybe all this chaos that we see, maybe we're just like, we're too honed in on the specifics, and maybe we're missing the larger picture where the tool is being sharpened by the back and forth and the clashes, and we're just like overwhelmed by being in it in the moment. But at the same time, you got Bill Maher last year or maybe the year before, basically, he was a liberal guy, basically embracing a lot of what people were saying were conspiracies during COVID. Like, it was in a lab in Wuhan, and it wasn't smart to lock everybody up, and we were washing the mail. Like, it was insane, and you didn't even spread that way, and you should have been outside, and we closed down beaches, and what kind of and he's been on that rant several times since those things all took place. So there you go, right? I mean, eventually the back and forth sort of gets there, and
yeah, I guess he didn't have the fear of whatever. He went ahead and spoke the truth.
Yeah.
He said he did. I think he said he did lose some followers or whatever. He says, but that's okay.
Friends probably too. Yeah.
He said, that's okay. I didn't like him anyway, or so, whatever he said. That probably wouldn't be true. But
yeah, that's a way of coping with it, right?
Yeah.
Like, whatever. Then you weren't really my friend to begin with, sort of.
Yeah, that kind of thing. But yeah, no, yeah. I mean, because I wasn't ever really not a Bill Maher fan, and when he started speaking some things like that, it's like, yeah, I still don't agree with a lot, but yeah, got to give you some credit there.
But you see how valuable he made himself by speaking the truth?
Yeah.
I mean, and he's done it about other things too. The whole transgender stuff and gender reassignment stuff and kids, and like he's really come out pretty hard on that too, and probably lost a lot of people as well. But when here's an atheist guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because he says those things, I'm more inclined to listen to him on things that I disagree with him on. Like, you know what? He's got a point. Okay, I can trust him here, but I don't know about this. Maybe I should think more about it. Sometimes I end up going, he's still just insane. He hasn't figured it out yet. He's just...
Well, I did hear him. He had somebody, it might have been Jordan Peterson on their interview, and they was talking to him about the Bible. You talk about the Bible a lot, whatever. Don't you realize that was just and it wasn't? And he, and I don't think it was not that he wasn't telling the truth. It was that, well, don't tell the truth, at least don't lie. I don't think he realized what he was saying was not true. Mm-hmm. It was facts based on maybe when he was in college and he took some of the courses, like how soon some of the
most of what people believe about the Bible is false.
Yeah, because I guess at one point they were said it wasn't written for 100 years or more after
baloney.
And that's not. They've discovered that that's not true. Yeah. That might have been what they were actually teaching at some point, maybe what they actually thought, but
it was.
He just hasn't. Those concepts haven't caught up with him, or maybe I don't know why he doesn't. But anyway, I was like, nope, that's wrong. Yeah. He's saying, it's like, no, that's wrong, and that's wrong. But hey, I mean, I don't know. The other stuff the other stuff he said was, I thought, but was it only because I agreed with him on the other things? And I don't know.
Well, yeah, there you go. We got to check our own things too. But there again, you have these two worlds. Oh, the Bible is this collection of fables written well after by a bunch of old white men. White men? Middle East, guys. Hello. And, invented later and books excluded and all this other kind of stuff. And no, actually, none of that. The Da Vinci Code, the worst historian ever. Dan Brown is a joke. It makes for great fiction, made for a great story. Played into stuff that people already wanted to believe, for sure. And yet you have all these other people that believe what we would believe about the Bible, that it's much more recently, closer to the actual time. We have older manuscripts. We have all these reasons why this wasn't just a bunch of fables, and there is not a single archaeological discovery that's ever challenged the truth of what we believe took place.
And they'll find the more recent version copies, and they go back and compare it to the older copies, and it's almost word for word. They said in the few cases where it is different, it's
like spelling errors or
minor things that don't really change the meaning.
Yeah, it's still basically the same story.
But it's sad just because I want to believe it. But I've seen.
Well, so I guess the test would be: could you show somebody if somebody lets you show them all of that as a defense? See, that's the problem. Most people don't actually sit down and go through that investigation. But if you had somebody, would that be telling as far as what's actually true?
But we had this discussion just recently, maybe last week or whenever it was, though. It's like, that's not what's going to get you.
Oh, it's not going to.
It's not going to change their opinion. Even if you gave them the facts, they may have. Well, they might make them question if they're honest.
Kind of, sort of, a chink in the armor, kind of.
Yeah.
But you've got C.S. Lewis. He did the investigation, and he came out a Christian. Lee Strobel, the movie, The Case for Christ. He did the investigation. He wanted it to be false, but he did the actual investigating because that's what he was trained to do, to be a real journalist.
Yeah.
When journalism was actually a thing. And he came out a Christian. And I'm trying to think of others. There have got to be others more recent. But I think when you find people that do that, that's what tells me that I'm not completely insane.
Yeah, it was the joke. There's a comedian. He tells the joke. I was a committed atheist. I also had an alcohol problem, and I was trying to do, keep my marriage going, and I was doing the comedy routine. He says, and I got to be a friend of a guy who, I guess he basically already had a lot of money. He earned a lot of money in his life, and he'd retired or whatever, but he was trying to do, that. Sorry, anyway, I'm telling too much of this. But anyway, he met this guy, and the guy had access to, I think, a golf course or something, and he didn't have money so he just stayed friends, even though the guy, as he found out later on, the guy was a Christian. And he said they're talking one day, and they came up, and the comedian says, "You don't actually believe all that stuff, do you?" He says, "Why, you don't?" He says, "No, I'm an atheist. I believe." He goes, "Oh, you're an atheist, huh?" He says, "So," and he says, "Yeah." And he's I'm damaging the whole story. He tells it much better, but he said, "Yeah, so an atheist is somebody who's studied all the world religions and comes up with them lacking and doesn't, after reading them all or studying them all to some degree, says, yeah, no, there's no God." He said, "No, did you do that?" He goes, No, I didn't do that." He's like, "Oh, so you're just a moron." He's like, "Wait, what?" He goes, "Yeah, you skipped all the work and you just jumped to the conclusion, like you think you know something." And he's like,
"Yeah."
And he goes, I wanted to be mad at him, but
he's right.
He had that, but he also had access to the golf course I wanted to play at. So, but it got me thinking, he said.
Well, but see how funny all those competing desires come into play there. And isn't it interesting, how many people actually think about that idea that, on the one hand, if you look back, one of the things that I think challenges the church today is that we go around and we go, oh, well, that we don't have the culture kind of helping us bring people to church. We have a culture that's sort of dragging people away from church. But I think most pastors and theologians today would acknowledge that, well, maybe the culture was sort of pushing people to the church that hadn't really given it a whole lot of thought and were just kind of there because that's what you did, right? Sort of cultural Christians. Well, isn't the opposite true? That if you're an atheist in a very secular world, that you may just be a moron because you are caught up in a cultural moment that says all of this stuff is nonsense. And you've never actually done the work like a Lee Strobel, like a C.S. Lewis, or like some of these others, and you're just taking it. What kind of moron would do that if the implications could be catastrophic, like eternal? Like, man, that's a lot of faith.
At least life-changing.
Yeah, life-altering kind of decisions here, and you're basing it all off of some of your favorite celebrities on Facebook or TikTok or something. Like, come on. Come on. And just because church people have screwed up, so that, like, there are some very popular people out there that were in the church and they left the church, and they're mad, and they're ex-Christians, they're deconstructionists, they're all this other kind of stuff, and they've got some really solid beef with Christians in the church. They're absolutely right about a lot of that stuff. But at the same time, if you were a judge, wouldn't you have to recuse yourself in a case where one of the people, the plaintiff or the defendant, is a person that blew up your car and lit your house on fire? Right? If somebody hurt you that bad personally, haven't you lost the ability to be unbiased and independent in your thinking and in your judgment?
They wouldn't let you be on the jury.
They would not let you be on the jury, and people would have a field day if you were the judge in the case and you didn't let that. I mean, that would be something that would be used on appeal to, take everything, all the time and energy you invested and make it go away. Like, oh, yeah, that case didn't count, so let's start over. So why don't you just let everybody know and just back out now?
All right.
So doesn't that make a lot of these people that have been hurt by Christians in churches not credible? I mean, I was actually thinking about this not that long ago. I don't remember why I got down this road here, but probably a Tim Keller sermon or something like that. But because he goes after this stuff a lot. There's some people that don't like him because he was in New York and he sounded a little bit more like a liberal than a conservative Christian, liberal politically, but he's straight. I mean, I don't know how much more orthodox you get. The stuff he says and the places that he said it, just shocking, just unbelievable. But everybody has some sort of bias. Why don't the people that are on the other side of this, especially if they're not even willing to investigate, and then if they've been hurt by the church, well, isn't your judgment off? Like, shouldn't you find unbiased sources then and say, you know what, I'm not going to decide. I can't decide. He also has this phrase where he says, doubt your doubts. And I think if people who doubted faith, doubted Christianity, spend as much energy, assuming they have actually invested the energy, if they put as much energy in doubting the beliefs that they end up using to replace their Christian beliefs, they would find that those beliefs are far less sturdy than the Christian ones. That in the end, we do have to take a bit of a leap, no matter what we believe. But you're on much sturdier ground when you leap in the direction of Jesus than if you leap in any of these other directions. So, are we very far from the original?
It's a little, you're talking about the logos, so I guess you're okay.
I think it's still in the ballpark.
Yeah, we went down a little rabbit hole there, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, but the truth, right? This is about the truth, and that we should have every incentive and every bit of our energy focused on determining what that is, even if it means we're wrong.
Yeah. When I read the part where he said, if you're in the class and you think, well, I don't really believe this stuff that the professor's teaching, but I'm just going to take it in, write it down, get on the test and regurgitate it so that I can pass the class because I have to have the class, then, what's the harm? But, when he said, no, it's going to cause you harm.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of took me a little bit off guard there, put me a little bit off guard because I never really, I didn't, when I'm taking one of these classes, when I was in school taking classes, I wasn't really thinking,
oh, of course not. Yeah.
That I would, I'm taking a class, right? Like you kind of said, I'm just trying to get the B in it or whatever, maybe an A if I can, but
yeah.
But so what is it going to harm if he said, if it's A, B, and C, and I remember A, B, and C, and I write it down, and then after the class, I walk away. I just didn't realize that.
Well, one of the things
I had to think about that. And I'm not really sure I grasp how it does it. I guess it's psychological. He talks about, some of that, but, I'm still not in full, not that I disagree, I'm just a not full understanding of how that really works. I could see if you did it over and over on the same subject. Yeah, well, eventually it's going to...
I actually thought about this a little bit. Well, first off, what he says, he does bring this up, where he says that you don't speak up, and then you don't speak up because you didn't speak up before, and now the tyrant is a little more emboldened and you're a little weaker to say the truth. That muscle, so to speak, has not been exercised, and so it's not as strong. And then before you know it, this is the Niemöller is a guy, a Lutheran pastor actually in Germany during World War II Nazi era, and there's this quote, and it's something like, "When they came for the trade unionists, I said nothing because I wasn't a trade unionist. When they came for the communists, I said nothing because I wasn't a communist. When they came for the socialists, when they came for these, and then finally, when they came for me, no one was left to say anything." Mm-hmm. That's the gist of it, right? So the way I internalized that personally was, I was a pretty good student, and so I was third in my class in high school, and there were more than 3 students, in case you're wondering.
I was going to say 5, but just
top 1%. I was in the top 1%, 3 out of 300. It was like 298, so I wanted to tell the truth there. So it was really like the top 3.25889%, whatever. So I was third in my class. College got a little rocky because it had gotten pretty easy. It was easy for me in high school. It wasn't so easy in college. I never really developed the right habits, and it was engineering, and I just wasn't as interested in it and in at least where I started. But I still ended up with pretty good grades. And then seminary was the same thing. My GPA was like 3.9 something, so I know this, and I know what it is to make sure you're getting a good grade, and telling the professor kind of, or at least not saying the things that are going to get you in trouble or knock down your grade. You pick the topics in a certain way. And being in some of the advanced classes, the AP classes, surrounded by people that were trying to eke out every single extra half point that they could, and it really was kind of annoying. And yet I was sort of doing it too. I just didn't go whine to the teacher about it. I was like, hey, they told you this, do it or don't do it. This is how you get it. Don't go up and go, nobody likes that. So I was around that a lot. And I will say that I think that it hurt me in a sense that, and I mean, this I think is true of most pastors, we're people pleasers. We tend to be people pleasers. And when you're a pastor, if you are only a people pleaser and you don't have some other thing to balance stuff out, I mean, that's a recipe for disaster in a congregation. First of all, how do you get up and speak the truth boldly if you're worried about what people will think about you and about what you said and about God and all these things? I mean, last Sunday we did this thing on divorce and adultery, and I was like, oh my God, I do not. It was probably the closest I got to being nervous about a sermon, and I wasn't even really that nervous. I just knew that it was something that
it's a touchy area.
It's touching a nerve. And the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, oh my God, it's everybody. Like, we are all touched by this somehow.
Yeah.
And I hope I brought it out and explained it that way and wasn't trying to be a jerk about it, just telling the truth.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I don't think
but that's hard. And if you have not exercised that muscle, I can tell you the energy it takes to do that. And I would say preaching is one thing. Preaching is a lot easier because it's not me, unless I call you by name from the pulpit, right? You can sort of deflect it and just say, oh, well, he doesn't know. He's not talking about me, all that kind of thing. But in ministry, there are moments where you encounter people that, and situations where you have to say directly to people, no, that's not right. That's not going to happen. We're not going to tolerate that. You were wrong. You need to seek forgiveness. And I did those things, but when I look back at how emotionally draining it was, part of me, after kind of reading through this, is like, I wasn't equipped for it. Our culture doesn't really help us. And I'm now thinking about all those times when I was just like, just get the grade. Just get the grade. Scholarship, scholarship, scholarship. I can hear my mom telling me, get good grades, get those scholarships, blah, 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 blah. Right? Mm-hmm. So it's not a great way to live.
Yeah, I mean, I could see where if you were dancing around it, that would definitely make the sermon harder because you would probably miss the point or lose the point or, just trying not to hurt somebody's feelings.
But you're not helping the people either.
Right.
I mean, why does Jesus go out of his way to say, this is bad? There's really only one reason. And oh, by the way, look at all these other examples of how God shows you, even when the one excuse, adultery, happens, maybe you shouldn't give up on it right away. And obviously that's a lot easier said than done, but it must matter somehow, right?
Yeah.
And freedom. I mean, think of the freedom. This guy, Tullian Shavidjian, he's a pastor out in Florida. He was a Presbyterian pastor. He wrote a bunch of books. He was at a big church, Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church, and then his wife cheated on him. He cheated on his wife. They got divorced. His life blew up. And now he's back, and he's had a church now for 3 or 4 years. So his life kind of blew up in about 2015. 2020, he started a new church and kind of got back into ministry. And one of the things that he says a lot is, my life blowing up was basically like the greatest thing because it gave me freedom. gave me freedom to say the truth. If, in keeping with this theme, I don't know if he uses that phrase, but he knows he's a sinner and he can't hide the fact that he's desperate for the grace of God. He doesn't have to put up a front and act like he's got it all together, because everybody knows he doesn't. And it's this freedom. And then it makes me think of John 8, where Jesus is having this thing back and forth with these scribes and Pharisees, religious leaders, elders, whatever. And he's like talking about being sons, sons of whoever the Son sets free will be free indeed. And your father, the devil, and lies. And then he said, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. That's a common phrase that we know. And then it gets into all this stuff about how we've never been slaves to anyone. Lies. I mean, here you see the father of lies, and that's how he gets into all that. So, but the freedom of living an authentic life, that's a word that comes up in here too, authenticity. You don't have to remember what you told anybody. You just live your life. Be you. So, anyway.
Yes.
We've been at this a while.
I think we covered it. We're not gonna have to come back and do part 2 next week.
No, I don't think so. I really would encourage everybody to read this, the book, read this chapter. There's it's dense. There's some really big words. Sometimes I'm like, well, I don't even know if I know that word. I know a lot of words, but I don't know that word. But I think he does a decent job of making it fairly easy, to a good flow to everything, and it eventually kind of comes together, even if you kind of think where am I going with this? So,
yep.
All right, y'all. Hey, Emil and Scott here, Open Arms Podcast Studio. Yes. What's the truth? The truth is, the world revolves around money. Money kind of makes things work, and is how we take care of everything, right? I mean, it's not money that's the root of all evil. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil. And, I don't love money, but I do love eating. And
eggs are expensive.
Eggs are expensive. A little less expensive now, but, still about 55% more expensive than they were when we first moved here, but 20%, 25, 28% less expensive than they were a month ago. So anyway, yeah, we got Open Arms, connecting people to Jesus. We've got the Nola's Icelandic Adventure, Nobody's Nola. They're great books. They really are. And we have a major termite infestation that will require many, many thousands of dollars of repairs. Help. You can go to openarmslidell.org. Give now. You got $1 million? We'll take it. We'll renovate this entire building. We won't have to deal with any more of that stuff. If you don't have $1 million, we'll take whatever you can give. But setting my sights high. Aspirations, expectations, hoping around, so. But we will see you next week, hopefully. And taste and see that the Lord is good. Ice cream is sweet, but Jesus is sweeter. Remember, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Later, y'all.